What happens when a beloved acting legend sits down for what should be a simple morning chat, only to face the most hostile interview of his career in under 30 seconds? One careless comment from the host turned a routine promotional appearance into a full-scale televised meltdown no one saw coming. Michael Caine walked into that studio with nothing but his trademark charm and professionalism. For decades, he had handled interviews with ease, promoting films, sharing stories, delighting audiences around the world. This one was supposed to be no different. A friendly chat with Lorraine Kelly, a few laughs, a mention of his latest project, and he'd be out the door before lunch. But from the moment he settled into that bright orange chair, something felt wrong. The atmosphere was tense. Lorraine, usually warm and effortlessly cheerful, seemed distracted, aloof even. She barely made eye contact as she rifled through her cue cards with an air of irritation. "Right then, Michael," she began abruptly, skipping over any kind of welcome. "Let's get straight to it, shall we?" Caine smiled politely, trying to keep the tone light. "Of course, Lorraine. Always happy to be here." "Are you, though?" She shot back, her tone slicing through the room. "Because honestly, looking at your recent film choices, I have to wonder if you're just phoning it in these days." The studio froze. Even the camera operator hesitated, unsure if he'd heard correctly. Michael Caine, an Oscar-winning actor who had worked with everyone from Christopher Nolan to Woody Allen, was being insulted before he'd even finished his first sentence. "I beg your pardon," he said evenly, the calm in his voice betraying a flicker of disbelief. "Oh, come on," Lorraine pressed, leaning back with a smug grin. "Let's be honest. You'll take just about any role these days, won't you? Batman, those dreadful disaster flicks. Where's the Michael Caine who gave us Alfie and The Italian Job?" Michael's jaw tightened, but his tone remained composed. "Well, Lorraine, I've been fortunate to work consistently for over 50 years. Not every role can be Shakespeare, but I put the same effort into every performance. Do you, though?" She interrupted, tilting her head. "Because watching your last film, it honestly looked like you were reading your lines off cue cards." The small studio audience shifted uncomfortably. This wasn't entertainment. They were watching an ambush. "I think you might be mistaken," Michael said, his politeness now visibly strained. "I've never used cue cards in my career. I learned my lines like any professional actor." "Right," Lorraine said with a dismissive wave. "Well, let's move on. Your personal life, then. All those marriages. Bit of a pattern, isn't there?" Michael's expression hardened. "I don't believe that's relevant to why I'm here today." "Everything's relevant when you're a public figure," she shot back. "Don't you think your history with women affects how audiences see you in romantic roles?" "My history with women?" he repeated, his voice cooling. "I'm not sure what you're implying, but I don't appreciate it." "Oh, don't play innocent," Lorraine said, her laugh sharp and derisive. "Everyone knows the stories, the affairs, the drinking, the parties. You were quite the ladies' man back in the day, weren't you?" Michael sat back, shaking his head slightly. "I think you've been reading too many tabloids, Lorraine. Most of those stories are nonsense." "Are they, though?" she countered, pulling a printed page from her notes. "Because I've spoken to people, directors, co-stars, and some of them had less than glowing things to say. Difficult to work with, unprofessional on set." Michael blinked in disbelief. "That's completely false. I've never had a complaint about my professionalism. In fact, most directors invite me back." "Do they?" she pressed. "Because looking at your recent filmography, it seems you're mostly working with first-time directors and low-budget productions. Not exactly A-list anymore, are we? The barbs came faster, sharper, each one designed to provoke. But Michael Caine, ever the gentleman, refused to take the bait." Through gritted teeth, he replied steadily, "I choose my projects based on the story and the people involved. Always have. Always will." The tension was unbearable. Even the studio lights seemed to dim under the weight of it. And in that moment, everyone watching realized They weren't seeing a light-hearted morning chat. They were witnessing one of the most uncomfortable interviews in live television history. Not every film has to be a big-budget blockbuster to be worthwhile, Michael said evenly. Right. Of course, Lorraine replied with mock sympathy. Has nothing to do with the fact that the big directors don't want to work with someone who's past his prime. Right? That was the moment. The air left the room. 70 years of grace, patience, and quiet dignity hung in the balance. Michael Caine sat perfectly still, staring across the table at the woman who had invited him onto her show, only to humiliate him on live television. And then, something inside him shifted. Past my prime. He repeated, his voice low and dangerous. Past my prime. He leaned forward slightly, his piercing blue eyes locked on hers. Let me tell you something about being past my prime, love. The words hung in the air like a slow-burning fuse. I've been in this business since before you could spell the word. Television, he continued, his tone calm but simmering with restrained fury. I've worked with Laurence Olivier, John Huston, Christopher Nolan. I've been nominated for 6 Academy Awards and won 2. I've entertained millions for over half a century. And you, he pointed subtly toward her desk, have the audacity to sit there and tell me I'm past my prime. Lorraine shifted in her chair, visibly unsettled by the shift in energy. But rather than back down, she forced a thin smile. Awards don't mean much if your recent work is mediocre, she said, though her voice had lost its earlier bite. The Academy makes plenty of mistakes. Mistakes? Michael's eyebrows rose sharply. Are you calling my career a mistake? I'm calling your recent choices questionable at best. Lorraine fired back. When was the last time you were in a film that actually mattered? That wasn't just a paycheck? Michael studied her, silent for several seconds, long enough for the tension to feel unbearable. When he finally spoke, his tone was steady but cutting. You want to talk about films that matter? He asked quietly. About roles that mean something? Let me educate you on what matters, darling. Every role I take, I give my best. Whether it's a $200 million blockbuster or a £5 million indie film, I show up, I work hard, and I deliver. That's what professionals do. Professionals, Lorraine interrupted coldly, also know when to retire gracefully. They don't cling to careers that are clearly over, the audience gasped. Even the cameraman froze. This was no longer journalism. It was cruelty. Michael rose slowly from his chair, his movements deliberate, commanding. Though older now, his presence filled the studio like a thundercloud. My career is over, he said, barely above a whisper. You think my career is over? He paused. The silence stretched so long it was almost unbearable. Let me tell you what's over, he said finally. This interview. Oh, sit down, Michael, Lorraine snapped, waving her hand dismissively. You're being dramatic. This is exactly what I'm talking about. You can't handle a few tough questions anymore. Michael laughed, but there was no humor in it. Tough questions? You call personal insults and tabloid gossip tough questions? You call public humiliation journalism? I call it holding people accountable. Lorraine insisted, her tone climbing in pitch as she tried to regain control. Celebrities think they can come on shows and get softball questions. Not on my show. Accountable for what exactly? Michael demanded, his voice now sharp as steel. For having a career that lasted longer than most networks? For still working when others have retired? For refusing to disappear just because it makes you more comfortable? Accountable, Lorraine snapped. For taking lazy roles just to pay the bills. For phoning in performances that insult your own legacy. Michael stared at her for a long moment, his eyes cold and unwavering. When he finally spoke, his words landed like hammers. You know what, Lorraine? He said, stepping slightly closer to her desk. I've met a lot of people in this business. Directors, producers, actors, journalists. Some were decent, some weren't. But I've never met anyone quite like you. "And what's that supposed to mean?" she asked, her voice trembling ever so slightly. "It means," Michael said slowly, "that you're so desperate to stay relevant, to create a viral moment, that you'd rather destroy someone's reputation than do your job with an ounce of integrity. You'd rather tear people down than lift them up. My job is to ask the questions viewers want answered," Lorraine said weakly. "No," Michael countered firmly. "Your job is to inform and entertain, not ambush your guests, not peddle gossip dressed up as journalism." The studio was dead silent now. The tension felt almost physical. Lorraine swallowed hard, her face flushed. "I don't spread lies," she said finally, her voice shaking. "Everything I've said today is based on research." "Research?" Michael repeated, his voice rising for the first time all morning. And for the first time in the show's long history, the audience didn't move, didn't blink, because they knew they were watching something that would never, ever be forgotten. "What research?" Michael demanded, his voice low but cutting. "Tabloid headlines? Internet rumors? Gossip from people who've never even met me? I have sources," Lorraine shot back, her tone defensive. "Sources?" Michael repeated, a bitter laugh escaping his lips. "Let me guess. Anonymous sources. The kind who wouldn't put their names to their claims. The same sources who say Elvis is still alive and the moon landing was faked." A ripple of uneasy laughter moved through the audience. Lorraine's face flushed crimson. "Part anger, part embarrassment. You're being ridiculous," she snapped. "I'm being ridiculous?" Michael asked, incredulous. "I'm not the one who invited a guest onto my show just to insult them for 20 minutes. I'm not the one spinning tales about affairs and drinking problems that never existed." "They're not made up," Lorraine insisted, though her voice wavered. "Then prove it," Michael challenged, spreading his arms. "Go on, show me this evidence you've got. Let's see these sources. Put up or shut up, as they say." Lorraine shuffled the papers on her desk, flipping through printouts, visibly flustered. All she had were half-baked internet articles and recycled tabloid quotes. Nothing remotely credible. "I don't have to prove anything to you," she said at last, trying to sound composed, but the edge of desperation crept through. "No," Michael said evenly. "You don't have to prove it to me. But you do have to prove it to your viewers, to the people who trusted you to conduct a professional interview, to your network, to everyone watching right now who expected better." Each word landed with the precision of a scalpel. He wasn't shouting. He didn't need to. Every syllable dismantled her authority piece by piece. Lorraine's composure finally cracked. "You think you're so clever, don't you?" she spat. "Coming in here with your fancy accent and your movie star attitude, thinking you're better than everyone else." "I don't think I am better than everyone else," Michael replied calmly. "But I do think I'm better than this. And frankly, your audience deserves better than this, too." He began unclipping his microphone with slow, deliberate movements. Every motion, steady, graceful, was a statement of control. "Where do you think you're going?" Lorraine demanded, panic creeping into her voice. "I'm leaving," Michael said simply, standing and straightening his jacket. "I came here to talk about my work, not to be ambushed by someone more interested in spectacle than substance." "You can't just walk out in the middle of an interview," Lorraine shouted. Michael paused at the edge of the set and turned back, his expression a mixture of disappointment and quiet contempt. "Watch me," he said. The studio was silent except for the soft hum of the cameras as he began to walk away, his mic pack dangling like a relic of the farce he was leaving behind. His every step carried a kind of effortless dignity, the kind only decades of mastery could command. But Lorraine couldn't help herself. In what would later be called the biggest mistake of her career, she raised her voice. "Oh, that's right," she shouted after him. "Just walk away, Michael. That's what you always do, isn't it? When things get tough, when someone calls you out, You just disappear. Michael stopped. Dead still. His shoulders straightened, his back rigid. The room froze. He turned around slowly. What did you just say? You heard me? Lorraine said, mistaking his silence for weakness. This is exactly what people say about you. When the going gets tough, Michael Caine gets going. Right out the door. People say that about me? Michael repeated, his voice dangerously calm as he began walking back toward her, step by deliberate step. What people? The same people I've been talking about all morning, Lorraine said, her bravado cracking. Real people, he asked, stopping at the edge of the set. People in the industry? People who've actually worked with me. Yes, she said quickly, but her eyes darted away. Michael placed both hands on the back of his chair and leaned forward slightly. Then name one. What? Name one person who said that about me. One director. One producer. One co-star. Anyone. He held her gaze. Give me one name. Lorraine's mouth opened, but nothing came out. She looked down at her papers, searching for something, anything, to grab onto. There was nothing. I can't reveal my sources, she stammered weakly. Because they don't exist, Michael said flatly. His voice dropped to a near whisper, colder than ever, just like everything else you've said today. And for a long, charged moment, the only sound in the studio was the low, relentless whir of the cameras capturing Lorraine Kelly's on-air unraveling, and the quiet, unshakable dignity of the man who refused to let her rewrite his story. You've built this entire interview on fabrications and gossip, Michael said evenly. That's not true, Lorraine protested, but her voice was small now, more instinct than conviction. Then explain something to me, Michael said, resting his hands on the back of his chair. If I'm so difficult, so impossible to work with, if I'm such a nightmare on set, then how do you explain this? He reached into his jacket and slowly pulled out his phone. The gesture deliberate, theatrical, like a gunslinger drawing his weapon. Christopher Nolan called me yesterday, he said, his tone calm but cutting through the silence like a blade. Not my agent, not my manager. He called me, personally, to discuss our next project together. Our fourth collaboration. Lorraine's color drained. Oh, and Steven Spielberg, Michael continued. He sent me a handwritten birthday note last month. Told me he enjoyed every minute of working with me, and that he hoped we'd do it again soon. Anyone can say that, Lorraine said weakly, her voice trembling. You're right, Michael replied, nodding. Anyone can say that, which is exactly what you've been doing all morning. But unlike you, I can prove it. He held up his phone. Shall I call Christopher now? Put him on speaker? Let your viewers hear for themselves. The challenge hung in the air like a live wire. The crew froze. Even the audience seemed to stop breathing. Everyone knew. If Michael Caine was willing to make that call live on television, he was telling the truth. That won't be necessary, Lorraine said quickly, her voice almost pleading. No, Michael said, scrolling deliberately through his contacts. I think it is necessary, because this isn't just about me anymore. This is about integrity, about truth, about what happens when someone decides that a microphone gives them permission to slander. Michael, please, Lorraine said, the fear in her voice now unmistakable. Please what? Michael asked, still not looking up. Please let you keep lying? Please pretend this never happened? Please protect you from the consequences of your own choices. I was just doing my job, she whispered. Michael looked up, finally meeting her eyes. No, Lorraine. You were doing the opposite of your job. Your job is to inform, to entertain, to treat your guests with respect, to give your audience something worth watching. He swept a hand toward the studio. The silent crew, the uneasy audience, the blinking red camera light. Does this look professional to you? Does this look like good television? Lorraine had no answer. She just sat there, small, shaken, Exposed. You know what's tragic? Michael said, his tone softening, though his words still carried weight. I actually came here excited to be on your show. I thought you were one of the good ones. Someone who cared about her craft. Someone who understood that television should bring people together, not tear them down. I do care, Lorraine said faintly. Do you? Michael asked quietly. Because caring means preparation. Real preparation. Not scrolling headlines and gossip blogs. Caring means asking questions that serve your audience, not your ego. Caring means treating your guests like human beings, not targets. He slipped his phone back into his pocket and unhooked his microphone. You had a chance today to have a meaningful conversation with someone who's been in this business for 50 years. You could have asked about filmmaking, mentorship, change, legacy. You could have given your viewers something real. I can still do that, Lorraine said, almost begging now. We can start over. Forget everything that happened and begin again. Seal shook his head slowly. No, we can't, because this wasn't a mistake. This was a choice. You chose to attack me instead of interview me. You chose gossip over truth. You chose spectacle over substance. He began walking toward the studio exit, his pace measured final. And the saddest part is, he said without turning around, you're actually quite good on television when you're yourself. You have warmth. You have charm. You make people feel comfortable. You could have been great. Could have been. Lorraine echoed softly, the past tense hitting her like a physical blow. Michael paused at the door and turned back one last time. His expression was calm. No longer angry. Just deeply disappointed. Could have been, he confirmed. Because greatness requires integrity, Lorraine. And integrity is something you can't fake. The studio door closed behind him with a quiet click that somehow sounded like thunder. For a long moment, no one moved. Lorraine sat at her desk, surrounded by her crew, her audience, her cameras, but utterly alone, isolated by the silence she had created. The red light on camera 1 still burned, capturing every second of her humiliation, broadcasting it live to the nation. She looked into the lens as if searching for words. An apology, an explanation, something to save her. But no words came. For the first time in her career, Lorraine Kelly had absolutely nothing to say.